everybody, welcome back to Kiki's Closet. You came on a good day because today is an Asian artist celebration and I am so excited. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's go.
Come on and come and play in Kiki's Closet today.
I am such a fan of today's guest, and if you're not already, I know you will be soon. Please help me welcome my friends Megan, Masako, Haley, Sam, Simahk, Saki, Masuda, and Marcus Shane. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Kiki's Closet. Thank you all so much for being here today. First question I want to ask everyone, what color is your heart today?
My heart? I think rainbow.
I love a rainbow heart. Okay.
Yeah. Blue, like my shirt.
I hope it's literally red and blue and a little purple.
Let's go with neon yellow, just because it's my favorite.
So I want to ask you all, what was the first time you saw yourself represented on stage?
You know, on stage it's hard to say. I can say in a musical. I remember being a little kid and watching the Brandy Cinderella, the Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella, and seeing Paolo Montalban play the Prince. The movie was so ahead of its time as far as non-traditional casting goes. You know, you have people of all colors, and the royal family is Victor Garber plus Whoopi Goldberg somehow makes a Filipino prince. That's probably the first time I was like, oh, an Asian guy can be an actor and he can be a prince.
I mean, to be completely honest, like I grew up in like a completely white neighborhood in Michigan. I was the only Asian kid, and there was like maybe 2 other black kids, and the rest was all white. Even when I moved to New York City, I still didn't understand that Filipino was Asian. Like I had no idea. Like I just saw myself when I was like growing up, and I thought I was the only kind of Asian because that's all I knew and saw. And so when I moved to New York and did my first contract at Miss Saigon, it was like a mind blow up for me. Like it was a completely new environment, and I learned so much stuff. I met so many new people, and it made me realize how closed off I was from the world. The first person though that I really saw on stage was Darren Lee in Chicago, the movie, because I remember seeing him and being like, oh my God, there is an Asian guy in the ensemble. And then I got to work with him during King and I tour, which was like a dream.
This is going to sound weird, but the children's theater that I grew up at, they did a production of Miss Saigon. So they have 2 casts. I was in middle school, so I wasn't allowed to be in it. It was for the high school kids. And so I went to the show. Their Kim was Asian. And I was like, oh, like that girl looks like me. She's the lead of this play. She is like up, down, singing, crying, laughing, dancing, like doing so many amazing things. And I actually just did a panel with that children's theater. They're talking about like, okay, like we used to think it was okay to cast, you know, you have one of the casts has an Asian Kim and the other one will just have a white Kim, dye your hair black and straighten it and have eyeliner on. Like that's going to be okay. It's going to be enough because it's just children's theater, right? But I think back to that, like if I had just happened to go a different night, I don't even think I would have known that like the show took place in Asia, because like the whole ensemble, you know what I mean? And I think back to it, like I had seen King and I at this children's theater, and like I don't remember thinking that it was in Asia or that anyone was supposed to be Asian, because no one was. So it's just like one of those weird things, or like that kind of was like an impetus for me to be like, oh, like I want to play that part. I know I can do it because I'm watching her do it. And it was just like by luck that I had seen that particular cast that night. So let's just fast forward 7 years later. I'm a senior in high school. They do Miss Saigon again, and I auditioned for it. And I got to play Kim. My double was white, but it also just breeds this idea that like, oh, I would have gotten that role but I'm white. So like, I'm actually the best one, but because like it has to be a black person or it has to be an Asian person, like someone else gets it who's less talented. That kind of, it breeds that kind of thing when like you got to play Aida and Kim and Eponine and, you know, all of these roles, and then also now you're only playing some of them. But also the idea that they like reached out to the Asian communities that we have, and we have a very large Asian community where I grew up, and then just put them all in the ensemble and then had this white Kim. Like that's not going to be okay anymore. You can't just be like, oh, we're going to reach out and then like, oh, why aren't you as good as all these kids who've been here for 10 years, instead of like it being a educational process and teaching people and teaching kids the things that they need to know to be a principal in a musical.
Saki, growing up in Sakurai, Japan, what kind of theater performance were you introduced to at a young age?
I actually saw Peter Pan in Japan, and that was when I realized that I wanted to do like theater, or like I wanted to be on stage. So my parents put me in a ballet school. I've been doing classic ballet in Japan, and since I came here, I've danced with modern dance company. So it's different from theater, musical theater, that they don't really have roles. Then my first theater job, I did a cat. Then I realized that, okay, so I can do that. Doesn't matter the race, where you're from, because it's also cat.
Sam, looking through your career and seeing all the leading men in golden age musical theater that you played, did you ever feel like you had an added pressure playing these roles typically played by white men? You did Tony in West Side Story, Sky Matcherson and Guys and Dolls, Curly in Oklahoma.
Yes and no. There is pressure. There is some pressure to it. The idea that somewhere in this audience, when I was playing Curly, let's say in Oklahoma, which is like the whitest guy in musical theater in so many ways, I recognized the idea that Houston is one of the most diverse cities in the country, and there are going to be some Asian kids in the audience, and that's my chance to be for them what Paolo Montalban was for me. At the same time, I recognize that I have been a beneficiary of colorism in the industry as well. Because I'm half Asian. And I think in a country that has these stereotypes about Asian men and Asian women, Asian women are sort of relegated to this sex object space that Miss Saigon sort of perpetuates in some ways and similar stories. And then Asian men are sort of like this shrill, emasculated, they can't possibly be leading men because they're barely even men, is this sort of stereotype. And so there's a pressure to overcome that. And at the same time, I recognize where sometimes, and this is where I'm cynical. I believe that I'm talented. I am confident in my abilities, but at the same time, I recognize that in an industry that is trying to actively fight these stereotypes, sometimes some well-intentioned producers might see a mixed race person and say, oh, this is a way to incorporate a person of color and fight a stereotype and increase demographically representative employment numbers. And at the same time, I'm presenting a form of a person of color that is more palatable to a broader racist American audience. But then that goes back to what Megan was saying earlier, that the internalized white supremacy that forces us to double think and second guess our own success. And that's done by people all around us. We can feel it. You can feel it when you go into a callback, to a holding room, and there are 4 white guys and me. I can feel them all look at me and be like, well, shit, the ethnic guy is going to get it. And what that does is it breeds not necessarily a doubt in oneself, but this recognition that a lot of people can see us on stage and not think, oh, well, they deserve to be there because they're talented. They think, oh, well, they are a beneficiary of affirmative action.
Megan and Marcus, pre-COVID, were on the first national tour of Mean Girls. Marcus, you're an assistant dance captain, and you also cover Kevin G. But when you go on, they change the show around a little bit, right?
They do. It's actually really awesome. I geeked out when I got to even audition for Tina Fey. Stage management called me to the office, and they showed me like the email that Tina sent them. And it was like, so we're gonna hire Marcus, blah, blah, and we're gonna change his name. And she like individually changed my name from the Kevin G name to a Korean name, which was so cool. And like, they did all this research. I still can't say it because I am so bad. The problem is that I don't have to say it ever in the show, but it's such a cool thing. It's funny because when we had the final callbacks, there was 10 boys left in the room, and they were looking for 3 understudies for Kevin, Aaron, and someone else. And I was the only Asian person there, and I was just like, this isn't gonna happen. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be Kevin G. Like, just watching the movie and doing that. And then I got cast, and I was just blown away. I was just like, this is such an amazing opportunity, and the way they changed the script around for it to include me, it was really awesome. And I feel special every time I get to go on and hear that.
Megan, will you tell us about your experience in Mean Girls as well, playing a role that was created on screen by a white actress?
The characters from Mean Girls, I just feel like we all know them so well. They're kind of just like American stock characters. Like if you're like, oh, you're Gretchen, like every single person in this whole country knows what you're talking about. So it's kind of fun just to like take that broad idea and just like make it myself. It was an interesting thing. So like Ashley Park, who originated the role on Broadway, she was so good, so funny. I've seen Mean Girls so many times. I was a super fan before I was ever in it. But it was one of these weird things that was like, I had multiple people in the industry and outside of the industry be like, oh, you're in Mean Girls? Are you the Asian one? Like, oh, you got it because they were looking for an ethnic person for that track, which is always going to be frustrating because, like, in a sense, like, yes, at this exact moment is like the token ethnic character that we have from our plastics. And like, it's frustrating because I feel sometimes like I can't just like Sam said, of like, I know about myself that I'm talented, I'm funny, I'm right for this part. But I feel constantly undercut by people being like, well, I couldn't have gotten it because they're not looking for white girls. It's so hard to get a job as a white woman in theater these days. That always kind of just like hurts in a way that just like stings a little bit. But we've had a lot of talks about it, even like within our company, you know, since we've all been in quarantine. And I think it's something that our producers and our creative team are definitely looking at it, being like, oh, how can we be less token and more just fully inclusive? Because the show is very racially diverse. I mean, I think, Marcus, this is like the first show I've ever been in where there's like 5 Asian people and none of us are related.
It's
like
huge.
In the show, you know?
There's so many Asian people.
Yeah, so like, I think that they've done so many really amazing things, but there are obviously more work to be done.
I have one last question. What stereotypes would you like to see the theater community move past? And when I say that, I mean in terms of writing or in terms of direction that you've received from the creative team sometime that you're like, I don't know if that's, you know, I don't know if we say that anymore.
One thing that I think is a problem for the Asian American community, I think it's true for the Latinx community, I think it's true for the Arab American community. We are seen as perpetually foreign, no matter where we're from, where we're born, and it's a product of media that has people speaking with Mexican accents and Japanese accents, regardless if they speak with an accent in real life. For true progress, I would like to see a lot more Asian American characters. That if they speak with an accent, they speak with like a Texan accent because they're from Texas, or they speak with a New England accent because they're from Rhode Island. But we're just not really at that point yet. We're sort of at the point where Asian American characters are being created, but they're very few. I think the Hapa struggle is that we're, and Megan, you're Hapa as well, and you know, we're not quite white, not quite Asian, and so where do people put us? But it'd be nice to have some Asian roles where we're not supposed to just fulfill a stereotype and keep propelling the idea that we are foreigners, even if we've been here for our entire lives.
Yes, I like to see more details about the roles instead of just Asian. They don't care about like where you're actually from.
I had the absolute pleasure when I first moved to the city. My first huge role was John in Anything Goes Tour, and Kathleen Marshall was directing. And she's an amazing woman, amazing director. And I just remember the first day of rehearsal, you know, I was so excited that I got the job. I wasn't really thinking about anything else. And she pulled me and Vincent Rodriguez aside the first day of rehearsal. And she was like, I don't want you guys to play stereotype. This is not that. She's like, this is a real situation. You guys are real people. You guys have real circumstances. There will be no stereotypes. This is not what I want for this role. And I really appreciated that because in the past I've worked with different directors who, you know, especially when there's like a 8-day rehearsal process or a summer stock, where they just like, when they hire you through that door, they just want you to be like, be Asian, whatever that means to them, which is like, A, so subjective, but B, just wrong now. I just don't want to hear that anymore. I don't care if it's a dinner theater or Broadway. I just don't think that should be acceptable anymore. That term, act more Asian, be more Asian, talk more Asian, it should not be in existence. That's what I would like to never hear again.
Just to give you one more example of this, I had an audition for a network television show for a Thai woman from rural Thailand, which I was a little like, me? And on the breakdown it said, accent optional. I was like, cool, I have one day. I can't do an authentic Thai accent overnight. So I went in, I did it, and the casting director was like, do it with an accent. And I was like, well, I don't know Thai. He's like, well, what are you? And I was like, first of all, that's illegal to ask in a job interview. And I was like, I'm half Japanese. And he's like, well, then just do a Japanese accent. I was like, I don't speak Japanese, and that this character is from Thailand. Like why would you need a Japanese accent for this? And it was one of those things where I looked at it and I was like, okay. And then I just didn't do it. And then I left. But it's like stuff like that, where like it's the idea that it's just like all of Asia is one place, is so mind-boggling because the cultures and the languages are so different. That being said, I also would love to see Asian men being sexy and desirable and romantic leads. I feel like we are like just at the cusp of maybe breaking through. I also would love to see more Asian women just being crass and funny. All my love to Aquafina. I think it's like a really exciting time because like I've gotten to play Kim and Tough Tim, but like that's not how I feel. I don't feel like this like small, dainty, delicate person. And so I would just love to be like crazy and weird and loud.
That's what you are.
And that's what I am. And I feel like I get to do that a little bit in Mean Girls. I still am like a little delicate, but a lot crazier and funnier.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me here today in Kiki's Closet. I feel like I learned so much, and I am so appreciative, and I hope to see you all real soon. Thank you.
Come on and come and play in Kiki's Closet today.